When a billionaire invited the cleaning lady to his elite gala as a joke, he never expected her to show up like a queen and expose his empire in front of everyone. She walked in as the help, but left with the room on its feet and him out the door. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about power, dignity, and a woman who turned the whole game upside down. Let's invite her. Imagine the look on their faces. The line cut through the air like a whip of arrogance, followed instantly by raucous laughter that echoed across the marble pillars of the Belmont Estate's private lounge. Glasses clinked, watches gleamed, cufflinks sparkled like stars caught in conversation. Around Victor Langston, the billionaire tech mogul, a crowd of socialites lounged on velvet couches, drunk not just on champagne, but on their own sense of importance. This was no ordinary Friday night. It was the night of the White and Gold Gala, an annual spectacle hosted by Victor himself. Everyone who was someone in the city made sure to be seen there. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities. He didn't just throw a party, he created a stage where power performed. Victor sat at the center of it all, draped in a white designer tuxedo, gold embroidery lining his collar like the trim of a royal uniform, his shoes, handmade in Italy. His ego? Even larger. Cigars were lit. The jazz quartet played something smooth and careless in the background. Outside, valets parked a parade of luxury cars, Rolls-Royces, Lambos, McLarens. It was all about status, class, money, and exclusivity. So when Victor made his joke, he knew exactly what he was doing. "I'll send an invite to the cleaning lady," he said casually, sipping his 30-year-old scotch. "You know, the one who hums Whitney Houston while scrubbing my floor." Laughter erupted again. "You mean the one with the big earrings and the church shoes?" Someone chuckled, adjusting his diamond watch. "Yes, her. Loretta James." "I think that's her name," Victor said, eyes gleaming. "Can you imagine her face opening a gold-embossed invitation? She'll probably think it's a mistake." Someone leaned in. "She won't come," Victor smirked. "Exactly. But if she does, it'll be hilarious." The room roared once more. But not everyone was laughing with the same energy. Near the edge of the lounge, Victor's assistant Megan froze for a moment. She had worked with Loretta before. She'd seen the way Loretta carried herself, kind, wise, and humble, but never broken. But Megan knew better than to speak. In Victor's world, silence was survival. Victor reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a custom card, an actual invitation, already designed, complete with raised gold ink, a wax seal, and a velvet envelope. "Black SUV courier," Victor said, snapping his fingers at an intern. "Have it delivered tonight, personally. I want her to get it before her shift ends." The crowd howled. "Oh my God, you're really doing this!" One woman laughed, nearly spilling her drink. Victor leaned back with a grin. What's life without a little entertainment? Later that night, in a much quieter part of the city, Loretta James mopped the hallway of Langston Tower's executive wing. The floor was nearly spotless, her back slightly aching, but her mind still sharp. She hummed "I Have Nothing" by Whitney Houston, the same song she sang to her daughter when she was young. Her worn sneakers squeaked gently as she moved. That's when the black SUV pulled up to the loading dock. The driver, suit, sunglasses, earpiece, stepped out like he was delivering state secrets. He walked past the janitorial bins and industrial soap containers and stopped in front of Loretta. "Miss Loretta James?" She turned, mop still in hand. "Yes?" The man handed her the envelope, as if he was placing a crown on a queen's head. "You've been formally invited to the White and Gold Gala at the Belmont Estate, courtesy of Mr. Victor Langston." Loretta looked down at the gold-trimmed card in her hands, thick, heavy, elegant. For a moment she said nothing, she just stared. Then she looked up at the driver. "Is this a joke?" He shrugged. "I'm just the messenger, ma'am." Back at Belmont Estate, the party was in full swing. Victor's staff finalized the last-minute details, themed lighting, custom centerpieces, and personalized menus. The whole night was designed to impress. But something in the air shifted the moment the guest list updated. Because Loretta James RSVP'd. And not just a casual yes. She wrote, "I'd be honored to attend. I'll arrive on time." Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and laughed so hard he nearly dropped his drink. "She said yes?" someone asked. "She's actually coming?" said another. Victor laughed. "Oh, this is going to be good. I should have a camera crew waiting at the entrance." More laughter, but now a few guests exchanged uncertain glances. There was something about this that felt off, mean even. Victor waved off the discomfort. "Relax, it's just fun. She gets a night out, we get a laugh. Everybody wins." What Victor didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that Loretta James had never once been invited to spaces like this. She had earned her way into rooms more powerful than any gala, not with money, not with fame, but with grace, grit, and a kind of inner power that couldn't be bought. The night of the gala arrived with all the pomp and spectacle the Belmont estate was known for. The mansion itself, a sprawling monument to wealth, glowed under crystal chandeliers strung across the grounds like suspended starlight. Every window flickered with golden warmth. The garden fountain sparkled under carefully placed spotlights, and the smell of roses, imported no doubt from Italy or France, drifted subtly through the air. The driveway had been transformed into a red carpet event, bordered by camera flashes, velvet ropes, and media crews from the most elite outlets in the city. Guests arrived in droves, stepping out of Lamborghinis, Ferraris, vintage Rolls-Royces, and custom Tesla Roadsters. Each arrival was more extravagant than the last. Reporters hovered near the carpet, barking out questions, while photographers snapped like their lives depended on it. Politicians smiled through whitened teeth, influencers struck perfectly angled poses, and socialites waved with the poise of practiced royalty. Everything shimmered, everything glowed. It was a stage built for the powerful, the glamorous, and the invited. Inside, the gala was in full swing. Waiters in tuxedos glided between the guests, carrying silver trays stacked with hors d'oeuvres most people couldn't even pronounce. A string quartet played near the marble staircase, the notes light and elegant. Laughter echoed from every corner of the grand hall. Above, a dome of stained glass gave the illusion of dancing under a golden sky. Everyone was dressed in white or gold, just as the dress code required. Then, everything stopped. It happened so suddenly, the silence was almost deafening. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. Heads turned in unison toward the front entrance as the unmistakable sound of an unfamiliar engine rumbled up the driveway. A sleek black car had arrived, not a luxury brand anyone could name. No logos, no gold trim, just polished obsidian steel and tinted windows. The kind of vehicle that didn't announce its presence with branding. It commanded attention with mystery. People squinted. Even the valet hesitated, unsure of how to approach it. The driver stepped out, a middle-aged man in a dark suit and gloves. No smile, no small talk. He moved quickly to the rear door and opened it with the formality of a royal escort. And then, she stepped out. Loretta James. But she didn't look like any cleaning lady they remembered. In fact, many didn't recognize her at all, until the whispers began. Her gown was deep purple, custom-tailored, hugging her frame with effortless grace. The fabric shimmered with every step she took, like moonlight reflecting on still water. The slit-up one leg revealed elegant heels, her stride smooth and confident, each movement deliberate and poised. Her skin glowed against the rich hue of her dress, and her makeup, flawless, soft yet bold, was the work of a professional. Her natural hair was styled high into a regal crown, and from her ears dangled teardrop diamond earrings that swayed like they had a rhythm of their own. She didn't walk, she glided. She didn't look around nervously or smile timidly at the stairs. No, Loretta walked that carpet like she'd been born to it. Like it wasn't a borrowed moment but her rightful place all along. Gasps filled the air. Some jaws literally dropped. People turned to each other in disbelief. Who is that? Someone whispered. Is that the cleaning lady? Another murmured, too stunned to blink. Victor Langston, standing by the marble staircase with a drink in hand, turned just in time to see her step fully into the golden light. His smirk evaporated. His glass trembled slightly in his fingers. And then he did something no one had ever seen him do at one of his own events. He choked on his champagne. He coughed, eyes wide, trying to recover both his breath and his composure. But it was too late. Loretta had already taken center stage, and she didn't need a microphone to command the room. Every eye followed her. Every conversation paused. Even the band quieted, uncertain if they were watching a guest or a queen. Victor forced a smile and began moving toward her, but Loretta didn't even break stride. She offered polite nods to the guests she passed, many of whom looked stunned to be acknowledged by someone they'd once ignored in the office halls or passed by without a second glance. She greeted a senator's wife with a knowing look, and the woman lit up with a smile, embracing her gently. A board member from Victor's own company, someone Loretta had once helped after hours during a quiet breakdown, walked over and kissed her hand. And as she reached the foot of the grand staircase, several people applauded softly, unsure why, only certain they should. Victor finally reached her. "Loretta?" he said, the edges of his voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "You actually came." She turned to him, her expression composed, eyes locked onto his like a hawk spotting something small and fragile. "I did," she said, her voice calm but clear. "Thank you for the invitation." Victor laughed awkwardly, searching for some witty comeback. Some way to take control of the moment. "Well, you clean up well, no pun intended." The words hung in the air like a sour stench. A few people nearby winced. One woman even rolled her eyes. Loretta didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly and smiled, but it wasn't a smile of flattery. It was a smile of someone who knew exactly what was happening. I always do, she replied softly. Then she turned away from him, gliding further into the ballroom, leaving Victor Langston standing there, silent, humiliated, and entirely unprepared for what came next. Because this night was no longer his show. It was hers, and she hadn't come for champagne. She had come to be seen, and no one would ever forget it. Victor Langston approached with his trademark grin, broad, smug, and dripping with the same confidence that had carried him through countless boardroom victories, viral interviews, and six-figure speaking engagements. He didn't walk so much as glide, his presence always larger than life, always accompanied by a subtle entourage of camera flashes and eager flatterers. But tonight, as he approached Loretta James on the ballroom floor, something in his step hesitated. Still, he kept his voice light, teasing. "Miss James, you actually came," he said, chuckling as if still trying to turn the moment into a joke. "You clean up well, no pun intended." Some nearby guests chuckled uncomfortably. Others winced. The tone was off. It was meant to reduce her, to put her back in the box he'd built for her, the one labeled, "just the help." But Loretta didn't bite. She turned toward him slowly, her face serene but unreadable. Her eyes locked onto his with a quiet intensity that stopped him mid-grin. There was no anger in her gaze, no bitterness. Just the kind of poised focus that comes from a life spent learning to navigate rooms that weren't built to welcome you. "Mr. Langston," she said, her voice low and rich, smooth like velvet but commanding like thunder just beyond the horizon. "Thank you for the invitation." There was a pause, a beat of silence thick enough to slice. Victor laughed, a little too loudly this time, clearly unsettled. "Well, I didn't think you'd actually accept, to be honest. Most people in your, position might have felt out of place." Loretta tilted her head slightly, almost pityingly. "I never feel out of place where I choose to stand." And then, without another word, she turned from him and walked forward, her stride steady, her back straight, her energy magnetic. The crowd parted as she moved. Some guests were still whispering in confusion, unsure of who she truly was. Others stared in stunned silence. They had expected awkwardness, maybe even embarrassment. Instead, they watched a woman radiate dignity. Loretta glided across the ballroom with practiced ease, not like someone out of place, but like someone returning home. She paused near the mayor, who turned with surprise, then immediate warmth. "Loretta," he said, smiling as he took her hand. "My God, it's been too long." They shared a quick exchange, warm and familiar. No small talk, no pretense. She had helped organize community events in his earlier campaign years, back before he rose to power. From there, she moved to the senator's wife, a woman dripping in diamonds and power. But as soon as she saw Loretta, she lit up like a schoolgirl. "I knew it was you," she said, leaning in for an embrace. "You haven't changed a bit, and you still walk like you're late for a stage." They laughed like old friends. Loretta had once been her vocal coach, back when the senator's wife had dreams of performing. Loretta had taught her breathwork and helped her conquer stage fright for a charity ball 15 years ago. And then came the final surprise. Loretta turned toward a corner where a man in a sharp white tuxedo stood frozen, his face pale. One of Victor's own board members. He didn't expect to be seen, but Loretta saw him. She walked over, her heels clicking against the marble like a slow metronome. The board member stepped forward uncertainly, and then broke into a smile that barely hid his emotion. "Loretta," he said softly, "you made it." She reached out and hugged him gently, like someone who had once seen him at his lowest. Because she had. Years ago, when his marriage was falling apart, when he came to the office in silence and left in stress, Loretta was the one who stayed late. She'd offered him a listening ear, not as an employee, but as a human being. She'd told him about grace and second chances. He never forgot that. Victor stood in the distance, watching all of it unfold, and his smirk slowly collapsed. The temperature in the room seemed to shift. The joke he had crafted so confidently was unraveling before his eyes. Because suddenly, Loretta wasn't the cleaning lady who got lucky with a dress and a good stylist. She wasn't the charity case who had wandered into the wrong room. She wasn't the punchline. She was the point. It turns out Loretta James wasn't just a part-time janitor. That was merely one thread in a much more intricate life. She had once been a professional vocal coach, teaching singers from churches, schools, and small theaters how to control their voices and how to find power in their breath. She had once dreamed of becoming a singer herself, but dreams take detours, especially for Black women who carry more than just their own hopes. Loretta was also a respected community leader, someone who volunteered every weekend at her church's women's shelter. And most importantly, she was the founder of Rise and Radiate, a nonprofit she'd built from the ground up, offering mentorship, scholarships, and life skills training for young girls of color in struggling neighborhoods. She had personally helped over 300 girls navigate college applications, job interviews, and the painful maze of self-worth in a society that often refused to see them. The cleaning job at Langston Tower? That was her side hustle. She took it to help fill the funding gap when corporate donors pulled out during an economic downturn. It was the work she did at night, after the speeches, after the coaching sessions, after helping teenage mothers learn how to budget, study, or heal. Loretta James had mopped marble floors not because she lacked ambition, but because she refused to let pride stand in the way of her mission. And now, standing in a ballroom designed to exclude people like her, she was being seen for the first time, not for what she did, but for who she was. Some people began to clap. Not many, just a few, unsure of why they were clapping, only knowing that they were witnessing something that deserved respect. Victor shifted uncomfortably. His entourage had grown quiet. Megan, his assistant, watched from behind a champagne tower, eyes wide with a mix of awe and guilt. The entire energy of the room had flipped, and Loretta hadn't even raised her voice. She hadn't made a speech. She hadn't demanded anything. All she had done was walk in her truth. And truth, when carried with dignity, doesn't need an introduction. It demands recognition. Victor Langston was still reeling. The spotlight that had always followed him now felt like a searchlight, exposing cracks in his carefully curated image. The crowd had shifted, whispers trailing behind Loretta like confetti in her wake. What was meant to be a moment of mockery had become something else entirely, something Victor no longer understood, let alone controlled. He watched her glide past the ballroom's centerpiece, an ice sculpture shaped like his company logo, and felt a strange unease crawl up his spine. The laughter was gone now, replaced by questions and silence. Dangerous silence. Desperate to reclaim control, Victor cut through the murmuring guests and caught up with her near the hallway leading to the wine cellar lounge. He reached out, gently but urgently grabbing her elbow, lowering his voice. "Loretta," he hissed, forcing a smile for the benefit of anyone watching. A quick word. Loretta turned with graceful ease, her expression unreadable, her presence as calm as ever. Still, she allowed herself to be guided a few steps away from the main ballroom, into a quieter alcove adorned with gold-trimmed mirrors and tall crystal vases filled with orchids. Victor checked over his shoulder to make sure no one was too close. Then he dropped the mask. "All right," he said, his voice low and sharp. "What is this? What's your game?" Loretta tilted her head slightly, studying him as if he were a puzzle she had already solved long ago. "My game?" she repeated, letting the words roll off her tongue like honey laced with quiet fire. "Victor, I'm not here to play games." Victor crossed his arms, his tone darkening. "Don't do that. Don't act innocent. You come in here dressed like royalty, knowing damn well this was supposed to be—" He stopped himself before saying a joke, but the word hung in the air between them, unspoken yet deafening. Loretta's lips curved into a soft smile, one of patience, not forgiveness. "I know exactly what it was supposed to be." Victor's jaw clenched. "Then why are you here?" She stepped a little closer now, not threateningly, but with quiet, undeniable purpose. "Because some lessons can't be taught from a distance," she said, her voice low but steady. "Sometimes, the only way to shake a man like you is to make sure the room sees the truth with their own eyes." Victor blinked, thrown off by the calmness in her tone. "No yelling, no accusations, just facts. You remember what you told your executive team last fall?" she asked. He hesitated. You told them that people like me should be grateful for crumbs. The janitors and cleaners were lucky to breathe the same air as you. I brought you your coffee one morning just to be polite. You laughed. You didn't even thank me. You made a joke about the smell of bleach and said, 'Some people just belong in the background.'" Victor said nothing. Loretta's voice lowered. "But what you didn't know, what you never bothered to ask, is that I didn't take that job out of desperation. I took it because I wanted to see how men like you behave when they think no one important is watching." He looked at her now, not with amusement, but with dawning anxiety. "Wait, what are you talking about?" Loretta took a slow, deliberate breath. "For the last year, I've been documenting your company's toxic culture, quietly, legally, and thoroughly. Audio recordings, testimonies, emails, videos. You see, I started noticing patterns. Hostile work environments, disrespect, racist microaggressions, classism that poisoned your halls from the top down." Victor stepped back, his face pale. "That's absurd." "No, Victor," she said, almost gently. "What's absurd is how you built an empire on innovation, but never learned how to treat people with basic human decency." A chill settled between them. Victor's mind raced. He thought about the things he'd said in boardrooms, the emails he'd fired off without filters, and the jokes he'd told at the expense of others. He thought about the intern he scolded publicly, the assistant he underpaid, and the janitor he called by the wrong name for 6 months straight. But you can't prove anything, he stammered. You're a cleaner. No one will believe. Loretta lifted a single brow, and in one graceful motion, she turned slightly, just enough for Victor to follow her gaze. At the bar, sipping a mocktail with lime, sat a sharply dressed woman in a silver blazer. Cool, composed, and watching them with a polite smile. She raised her glass slightly when Loretta met her eyes. Victor frowned. Who's that? My attorney, Loretta said calmly. She specializes in labor law and corporate ethics. We've been working together for months. Victor nearly staggered. And she's not the only one, Loretta added. You'll be hearing from more people soon. Not because I want revenge, but because people deserve better than what you've given them. They deserve to be seen. He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Loretta's voice softened, but her message struck like lightning. You built this empire thinking the invisible ones, the janitors, the secretaries, the servers, would never have the power to challenge you, that they'd never organize, that they'd never rise. She leaned in slightly. But Victor, I'm not alone anymore. From behind them in the main room, music resumed, and a quiet buzz rippled across the crowd. Loretta's attorney had begun speaking to a small group of reporters. A few guests were recording. A whisper passed through the ballroom like a growing flame. Victor swallowed hard. His palms were sweating now. You have no idea what this will do to my company, he muttered. No, Loretta said, but I know exactly what it will do for your employees. It'll give them hope. It'll give them proof that no one is above accountability, not even a man with marble floors and $1 million smile. Victor stared at her like she was a ghost or a reckoning. Loretta gave him a final nod and stepped past him, returning to the ballroom. Not with drama, not with flair, but with quiet triumph. She didn't need to shout. The truth was already echoing louder than anything she could say, and as her attorney stood tall near the center of the room, fielding questions, passing out statements, and showing evidence of what had taken place behind those glass office doors for years, the guests began to see what Victor had failed to notice from the beginning. Loretta James had never been just a cleaner. She had always been the storm he didn't see coming. As the soft strings of the quartet faded and the evening program paused for its traditional toast, an unexpected figure stepped onto the stage. Loretta James. At first, people weren't sure what to make of it. There was no announcement, no spotlight, just the quiet sound of heels on polished hardwood, and then the tap of her fingers against the microphone. The feedback buzzed for a second. The room held its breath. Loretta stood there, poised beneath a crystal chandelier, the purple of her gown catching the warm light like liquid royalty. She didn't fidget, she didn't clear her throat. She simply looked out at the sea of white and gold and began to speak. Good evening, she said, her voice steady, calm, and clear. I wasn't meant to be here tonight, not as a guest anyway. People began to murmur, confused. But here I am, she continued. Not as your cleaner, not as a joke, not as a punchline for a man who mistook cruelty for humor. I'm here as a woman, a leader, a voice. Silence fell. You could hear the crystal glasses settle on tabletops. For far too long, she said, pacing slowly. This world has taught us that the worth of a person is measured by the size of their wallet or the shine on their shoes. That power is more important than principle. That only the people at the top deserve to be seen. She looked directly at Victor Langston, who stood frozen beside the stage, face pale, arms stiff at his sides. But here's what I've learned, Loretta said, her eyes never wavering. Power is not a suit. It's not a brand name. It's not an invitation delivered by a man in sunglasses. True power comes from knowing who you are, even when no one else sees it.